Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Monday, December 4th, 2023 at 10:53 a.m. First, let me apologize. We've experienced some technical difficulties this morning, but luckily our staff has worked diligently to work through them, and we certainly appreciate what they've done to get us online. We are here today in docket number 2023-154E, which pertains to South Carolina Public Service Authorities, also known as Santee Cooper's 2023 Integrated Resource Plan. Let's take appearances. Let me do roll call of commissioners first. Present in the hearing room, we have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carol Lee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin. For the record, I note that Commissioner Justin Williams is on leave this week at an educational seminar. Let's take appearances of the parties. Who's representing South Carolina Public Service Authority, which I will probably refer to as Santee Cooper throughout the proceeding?
Good morning.
I don't think you're on, Mr. Pelcher. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Belser and Commissioners.
You need to speak into the microphone for me. Sorry.
Okay. Stephen Pelcher on behalf of the South Carolina Public Service Authority, entering an appearance. I'd like to introduce my colleagues here.
Yes, sir.
Megan Driggers. She's in the overflow seating over there. Belton Ziegler, Alex Brazil, and Ashley Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Pelcher, and welcome. Interveners, we have Sierra Club.
Good morning, Commissioners. Isabella Ariza, Dory Jaffe, and Robert Giles on behalf of Sierra Club.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
Chair Belser, Richard Witt on behalf of SCEBA. Also appearing on behalf of SCEBA is SCEBA's General Counsel, John Burns, who is admitted pro hoc vici in this docket. And I have a further issue if it's appropriate at this time.
Let's get through the appearances and then we'll take preliminary matters, Mr. Witt, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to both of you. Century Aluminum of South Carolina Incorporated.
Chair, Commissioners, Taylor Spear, Fox Rothschild, Greenville, South Carolina for Century Aluminum.
And is Mr. Cox with us virtually?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spear, and welcome. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Kate Mixon here on behalf of SACE and CCL, and with me today are my co-counsel Emma Clancy and Christina Tidwell, who has been admitted pro hoc vice.
Thank you and welcome. Central Electric Power Cooperative Incorporated.
Madam Chair, Frank Ellerby for Central Electric Power Cooperative. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir. Santee Cooper Industrial Customer Group.
Madam Chair, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm here on behalf of the industrial customers.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Welcome. Google LLC.
Madam Chair, my name's Mary Shade. I'm representing Google LLC in this proceeding.
Thank you and welcome. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Madam Chair, good morning. Nicole Given appearing on behalf of the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff. Present with me in the hearing room today is Chad Torrey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I get all the parties? Okay. Now, I think we have some preliminary matters that we need to discuss. Where is my list? Mr. Richard Witt, would you like to go since you've broached something already?
Thank you, Chair Belser. Because of illness with the respiratory bug that's going around in the Midlands, I'm not able to appear today. And but because I have sponsored John Burns and pro hoc vici admission, Attorney Scott Elliott has kindly agreed to sponsor Mr. Burns as a South Carolina attorney in good standing, and I assume you want to hear from him, and then I have a further issue.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. Mr. Elliott?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to sponsor counsel. He's very highly qualified. He's an experienced attorney, and I think he will represent his client very well. But I'll be here during.
And Mr. Burns is appeared before us a number of times, and I think he understands the procedures. Hasn't the rule been changed that the sponsoring attorney can be excused from the proceeding? I think it's 404I to the extent, but we will allow that substitution as needed.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Witt.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Witt.
Chair, I'm sorry, Chair Bells. A further issue is that because of my illness and because I don't want to make anyone else sick, I'd like to have permission from the chair to appear virtually on a limited basis, namely later in the hearing when I will present Sasiba's witness, Arnie Olson, if that's okay with the chair.
I will leave that to your discretion. Mr. Burns, I think, will carry on ably when you're not available, but certainly you need to take care of yourself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Does that conclude
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sasiba's issues? Okay.
It does, and thank you, Chair Belser.
Okay. I think we had an issue about a motion to leave to file supplemental rebuttal testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And it's my understanding that CCL has no objection to that. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yes,
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Ms. Mixon, thank you. Then that will be allowed.
Thank you, Chair Belser.
Does that take care of that issue?
That does.
Thank you. I see heads nodding. Now, we have some witnesses requesting protection. The appearance list which you've been given shows the order in which all the parties filed for intervention. To the extent that we need to rearrange appearance of any of those intervening witnesses to accommodate schedules, I'm going to ask that y'all work that out among yourselves. So we will recognize when it comes time for cross-examination, I will call attorneys in that order on that list. But if you need to present witnesses out of order to accommodate schedules, I'm going to ask that y'all work that out. Any questions? Any objections? Okay. That's the protections. I know I had protections for witnesses from SACE, CCL, SACE and CCL, and also from Sierra Club. Mr. Elliott.
Madam Chair, I would mention that we have also requested protection for our witness, but we'll work it out.
I apologize. I didn't have that one down.
I would inquire of the chair of the commission's schedule for the week. I would note that I'm the town attorney for the town of Winsboro and for the town of Arcadia Lakes. Both meet in the evenings this week. Winsboro at 6:15 and Arcadia Lakes, Winsboro on Tuesday and Arcadia Lakes on Thursday. You have accommodated me on these occasions in the past, so to the extent that you can accommodate me so that I can get to these meetings, I would appreciate it.
Mr. Elliott, we will try. I cannot promise anything,
Yes,
but I will try. I do tend to go to 5:30 or 6, depending on where we are with a witness. If I can avoid having a witness under oath over the evening, I try to do that. It's not always doable, but I do try to do that. So we'll have to see.
My clients are aware and will be patient. I think there's
your clients here or your clients there?
No, my clients in Winsboro and Arcadia Lakes. So,
so tomorrow is Winsboro,
right?
And what time would
I would need to be out of here for traffic by 5:15.
All right, sir. Please remind me tomorrow.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I think we had a supplemental motion for confidential treatment filed by Google. Is that correct, Ms. Shade? Turn your mic.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. I believe that confidential treatment for that testimony for direct was already granted, and that will be treated as confidential, and confidentiality will be maintained. I know that you haven't practiced before, so the biggest thing is to talk into the microphone, and I know that everybody's used to standing when addressing the tribunal. I much prefer you talking to the microphone than stand. So even if you feel, I'm more comfortable standing. If you need to stand to address the chair, just get to one of the microphones at one of the podiums. It's probably going to be that one for most interveners. I think the applicant's got you blocked off over here. So, anything further preliminary that needs to come before us before we begin? Just let us know. Mr. Pelcher. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. At this time, we will be calling our first panel of witnesses, which will be witnesses Dembla, McCants, and Wagner.
Madam Chair,
Gentlemen, please come forward. Mr. Barnes.
just for clarification, how would you prefer that we handle cross-examination? Would you rather we do it from the podium so the witnesses can see us if we're sitting behind them?
I think that is probably better for the witnesses rather than having a voice coming in from behind them.
Okay.
But we just need people to get to a microphone and speak because we have attorneys virtual, we have commissioners virtual. We just all need to hear.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you all please raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you'll give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dembla, I'll give you a second to get situated.
Thank you.
It should be. Is this better? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Dembla, please state your name for the record.
Rahul Dembla.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
By Santee Cooper as its Chief Planning Officer.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 42 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on July 14, 2023 in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I do not.
And I've asked you the same questions here today. Would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision two exhibits labeled as Direct Exhibit RD-1 and Direct Exhibit RD-2 that were previously filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed direct testimony in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
No.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony and exhibits of Mr. Dembla be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Dembla's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand. Mr. Dembla's pre-filed direct exhibits, I believe that are marked RD1 and RD2, will be a composite hearing exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 1 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you. And Mr. Dembla, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision rebuttal testimony of 38 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on October 27th, 2023 in this docket?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any changes, additions, or updates to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
No. Sorry, I do. I'm going to take that back. Yes, I have two updates. On page 8, lines 19 through 22, I state that while Santee Cooper modeled the new 18% PRM as requested by ORS under the Coordination Agreement, CA, with Central Electric Power Cooperative, it must discuss changing its PRM from 17% to 18% with Central before adopting the new PRM. On November 16, 2023, the Joint Planning Committee of the CA approved the 18% reserve margin. On page 24, lines 11 through 13, I state that Santee Cooper has recently reached an agreement in principle with a large industrial customer for a portion of its requirements to be served by a non-firm product. Since the filing of my rebuttal testimony, Santee Cooper finalized the agreement with this customer. Approximately 50% of the customer's total load will be served as non-firm under currently available riders. With the recent steps taken by Santee Cooper, we now project the reserve margin already exceeds 18% through the winter of 2025.
Thank you. Subject to those updates, if I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper, May I ask for clarification? Was that 50 or 15% that you just mentioned in that second?
It was a 50%.
50%.
50%.
50.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was approximately 50% of customers' total load.
Thank you.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision two exhibits labeled as Rebuttal Exhibit RD1 and Rebuttal Exhibit RD2 that were previously filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
I do not.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I move that the pre-filed rebuttal testimony exhibits Mr. Dembla be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Dembla's pre-filed rebuttal testimony as corrected from the stand this morning will be entered into the record as if given from the stand. And the rebuttal exhibits are, I believe those were also RD1 and RD2, is that correct? That were attached to the rebuttal?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 2 and received into the evidence of this case. I do have a question. Was there a confidential on the exhibits? Was there something confidential in that?
I don't believe there was any. Chair, I do not believe there was anything confidential in those exhibits.
Just had a note from someone that they thought there might be some confidential. Thank you very much. Those are admitted.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Dembla, have you prepared a summary of your direct and rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please deliver that at this time?
Sure. Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. In my direct testimony, I provide an overview of the process followed in developing Santee Cooper's IRP and the key conclusions in the IRP. I summarize Santee Cooper's recent planning efforts and related resource decisions incorporated in the IRP, including the previously announced decision to retire the coal-fired Vineyard Generating Station. I also describe Santee Cooper's relationship with Central as it relates to resource planning and impacts on our IRP, and Central's recent decision to contract for 672 megawatts of capacity as its non-shared resource. Santee Cooper proposes to use this IRP and the preferred portfolio selected based on the results of the IRP in concert with annual updates to guide its generation planning during the coming 3-year IRP planning cycle. For clarity, in my rebuttal testimony, I discuss supplemental analyses performed to respond to certain recommendations from the ORS. Those supplemental analyses confirmed the conclusions presented in my direct testimony, with only slight modifications to the preferred portfolio provided in the May 2023 filing, and it is the preferred portfolio supplemental that Santee Cooper is asking the Commission to approve as its preferred plan. The preferred portfolio discussed in my direct testimony is based on the economically optimized portfolio, which was the most economical of 4 foundational portfolios analyzed in this IRP. The preferred portfolio makes limited changes to the economically optimized portfolio to reduce risk and support the practical requirements of portfolio implementation, and does so without materially impacting cost. The preferred portfolio allows Santee Cooper to reliably serve projected load growth while increasing the energy from renewable and natural gas resources. It therefore allows Santee Cooper to enhance its portfolio diversity, reduce its reliance on coal, and lower CO2 emissions at reasonable cost, and importantly, without sacrificing reliability. The preferred portfolio assumes Vineyard retirement by 2031, the earliest date Santee Cooper believes replacement generation would be available. It supports adding substantial solar resources commencing in 2026, adding a large natural gas combined cycle resource upon retirement of coal capacity from Vineyard, and adding combustion turbines and battery energy storage to meet other resource needs into the 2030s. It provides Santee Cooper flexibility to adapt to changing loads and generation needs and opportunities as they develop, including a potential joint resource project with Dominion Energy South Carolina and Central's recent decision to contract for 672 megawatt of PPAs. It can also accommodate the potential addition of significant new load if current economic development opportunities are realized. As part of its IRP process, Santee Cooper engaged a third-party consultant, VanRe, to support an extensive stakeholder process as required by the statute, in which central and municipal and utility customers participated. Santee Cooper also solicited direct input from Central throughout the development of the IRP. The coordination agreement with Central contains processes for resource planning for the combined system. These processes were followed in preparing studies and forecasts for this IRP. Santee Cooper held 5 public virtual stakeholder meetings and posted extensive materials on an IRP website available to the public. Santee Cooper received and responded to numerous stakeholder questions for clarification and requests. Santee Cooper also created an IRP webpage and provided all meeting materials, including presentations, question and answer logs, meeting summaries, and video recordings following the meetings. The IRP webpage also provided a link to a forum where stakeholders could post questions or feedback for Santee Cooper to consider. Each stakeholder meeting was attended by up to 100 participants, representing a wide range of interests, and over the course of all 5 meetings, over 430 questions and answer interactions were recorded. The major assumptions that underpin the IRP incorporated input and feedback received throughout the stakeholder process as appropriate and were developed based on industry best practices, public data sources, and third-party expertise and studies. In preparing the IRP, Santee Cooper retained third-party consultants who, with input from in-house experts, deployed new resource optimization software, modeled portfolios and sensitivities, and tested the resulting portfolios against multiple metrics. These metrics included measures of cost, CO2 emissions, renewable generation, generation diversity, and rate impact. Third-party consultants also assisted Santee Cooper by creating, among other things, load growth forecasts, planning reserve margin and ELCC studies, and energy efficiency and demand response potential studies. Santee Cooper's IRP identifies a roadmap for long-term decisions that moves our resource portfolio toward more renewables and a significant reduction in carbon emissions while balancing the critical importance of system reliability and low-cost power. This roadmap provides a framework to allow Santee Cooper to press forward with important near-term resource decisions. The IRP's short-term action plan provides a sound basis for near-term planning and implementation activities that Santee Cooper will undertake to ensure continued reliable and cost-effective service to all our customers. Among other things, Santee Cooper will continue to work with Central and engage with market participants to identify options and transmission arrangements to reliably meet capacity needed prior to implementation of capacity resources in its preferred portfolio. Santee Cooper will also proceed with further actions and investigations to determine how best to implement the combined cycle resource the IRP demonstrates would be an economical and valuable resource for the combined system, including evaluation of a potential joint build with Dominion Energy South Carolina. Santee Cooper will pursue a phased implementation of solar resources consistent with the Commission-approved CPRE program. And to inform future IRPs and resource decisions, Santee Cooper will continue to examine and engage with stakeholders as appropriate on other important issues, including the future of cross-generating station, the impacts of substantial amounts of intermittent renewable resources on system reliability, potential retirement of Hilton Head and Myrtle Beach combustion turbines, updates to reserve margin, ELCC, and solar integration cost studies, and the opportunity to develop a battery storage pilot project to enhance Santee Cooper's familiarity with this emerging technology. Santee Cooper will also continue monitoring regulatory developments related to reducing CO2 emissions to determine the impact on Santee Cooper's resource plans. Santee Cooper filed its IRP for commission review under the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 583740 and believes it meets all the requirements of that statute as well as industry standard generation planning and IRP practices. The IRP was developed with significant contributions from experienced industry experts using a robust and transparent process. Like all IRPs, it is a snapshot in time. The inputs, forecasts, and assumptions on which it is based are constantly evolving and will be updated annually. When resource decisions are to be made, they will be made based on the data, inputs, and forecasts that are available at the time. Nevertheless, this IRP represents a sound generation plan encompassing the known and reasonably anticipated conditions at the time it was formulated. It identifies a recommended preferred portfolio that represents the least cost and least ratepayer risk solution to meet the needs of the combined system. And the proposed short-term action plan focuses on resources common to the preferred portfolio and other portfolio strategies studied for which implementation activities should proceed prior to the next IRP. It is an appropriate guide for Santee Cooper's future generation planning and fully complies with applicable statutory requirements. This concludes my summary. I will now present a summary of my rebuttal testimony. In my rebuttal testimony, I provide an overview of Santee Cooper's response to the recommendations raised by the ORS, address actions taken to meet capacity needs and ensure reliability during years 2023 through 2026, and respond to certain intervenor recommendations. ORS determined that Santee Cooper's 2023 IRP complies with most of the elements required by law. However, ORS recommended that Santee Cooper provide revised foundational portfolios to further demonstrate that the preferred portfolio is the most cost-effective and that ratepayer risk has been appropriately mitigated. In response, Santee Cooper performed supplemental analyses and updated its foundational portfolios to allow a more direct comparison to the recommended preferred portfolio. The revised foundational portfolios and supplemental analyses are included in the addendum, which together with the original 2023 IRP constitute Santee Cooper's integrated resource plan. The revised portfolios all incorporate an 18% winter planning reserve margin target, the Wenya retirement in 2031, the central non-shared resource power purchase agreements modeled as resources, consistent combined cycle resource options across cases, and consistent constraints on annual solar additions. The addendum includes these updated supplemental portfolios and a recommended preferred portfolio supplemental, which is analogous to the preferred portfolio adjusted in the 2023 IRP. Based on the supplemental analyses and the original 2023 IRP analyses, Santee Cooper identified the preferred portfolio supplemental included in the addendum as the most cost-effective and least ratepayer risk plan. The plan is similar to the preferred portfolio adjusted described in the original 2023 IRP, and the slight differences from the preferred portfolio in the original 2023 IRP do not impact near-term resource decisions or change the key elements of Santee Cooper's short-term action plan. More specifically, the supplemental analyses and the original 2023 IRP both identify the following key elements of the preferred portfolio that should guide Santee Cooper's further planning and implementation activities over the next 3 years. Add approximately 2,400 megawatts of solar capacity by 2035 in a phased approach by adding approximately 300 megawatts per year from 2026 through 2030. Develop a natural gas combined cycle resource by 2031 to provide at least 1,000 megawatt of capacity, depending on further investigations of a joint build with Dominion and considering the effect of economic development efforts on load growth. Add several hundred megawatt of battery energy storage and peaking resources beginning in 2030s, as needed to meet capacity and reserve margin requirements. Continue to operate Vineyard until the natural gas combined cycle is implemented and sufficient capacity resources are available to ensure reliability. In addition to the natural gas combined cycle in 2031, developed jointly with Dominion, the preferred portfolio supplemental adds 2,700 megawatts of solar, 350 megawatts battery storage, and 112 megawatt of peaking generation through 2040. ORS also requested that Santee Cooper discuss steps to mitigate reliability risks during the 2023 through 2026 period. I note that Santee Cooper and Central have mature processes for evaluating system demand and ensuring adequate reserve capacity to support it. Prior to the original 2023 IRP filing, Santee Cooper was working to address the capacity need created by 17% winter reserve margin increase, approved by Santee Cooper and Central, and the potential increased demand on the system. Since the filing in May 2023, Santee Cooper worked to acquire approximately 350 megawatt of additional capacity through short-term PPAs and acquisition of the natural gas-fired combined cycle cogeneration Cherokee facility, which will be available during the upcoming winter season. Since the May IRP filing, economic development activity has resulted in additional demand beginning in 2025 and increasing to approximately 150 megawatts by 2026. In my rebuttal, I discussed several options available to meet this new load and support the higher 18% reserve margin, including a recent agreement in principle with a large industrial customer for a portion of its requirements to be served by a non-firm product. Per my earlier update, Santee Cooper has since finalized the agreement with that customer. With the recent steps taken by Santee Cooper, we now project the reserve margins already exceed 18% through the winter of 2025. ORS recommended Santee Cooper provide justification for the 300 megawatt annual limit of solar additions modeled in the preferred portfolio. Santee Cooper believes that accelerating the addition of solar to 2026 and using a phase-in approach rather than waiting for installation of a large amount of solar in 2029 supports our carbon reduction goals and reduces risks. This early adoption also allows the organization to develop the necessary knowledge and processes as we operate increasing amounts of intermittent resources on our system while maintaining reliability. The ORS also made 7 other recommendations to add topics to future IRP stakeholder meetings, many of which were already included in the short-term action plan. Santee Cooper agrees to incorporate these recommendations into future stakeholder meetings. CCL says Witness Summer recommends that Santee Cooper determine the economically optimal portfolio for compliance under each major compliance pathway of the EPA Section 111 rules. And Sierra Club Witness Glick recommends that the IRP be revised to model the compliance pathways available for the existing and proposed fossil generators under Section 111 rules. Santee Cooper will monitor the EPA's actions, include the issue in future stakeholder discussions, and incorporate the impacts of a final rule into future IRP filings. However, due to the uncertainty around the final rule, Santee Cooper cannot reasonably analyze compliance with a rule not yet adopted. Witness Glick recommends Santee Cooper begin issuing all-source RFP and focus its near-term planning efforts on obtaining as much renewable capacity and energy as possible. She also recommends that any future proceeding for a certificate of public convenience and necessity for the proposed shared resource be informed by an all-source RFP and allow bids from battery resources and renewables. Santee Cooper is committed to procuring significant amounts of renewable energy and capacity following a specific identified utility need as identified by Santee Cooper in its integrated resource plans or other planning process, and will do so in accordance with Commission-approved CPRE guidelines and in coordination with Central. Santee Cooper also intends to conduct its integrated resource plans and siting proceedings in accordance with the state law. The Google witness recommend that Santee Cooper consider an accelerated investment schedule in carbon-free resources and begin coordinating with its large industrial customers. Santee Cooper is committed to investing in carbon-free resources at a reasonably aggressive schedule. Its IRP includes the addition of over 2,700 megawatts of utility-scale solar by 2040 for the benefit of its customers. Santee Cooper is open to exploring opportunities to partner with its industrial customers in achieving their carbon reduction goals. For large customers served indirectly, like Google, Santee Cooper welcomes exploring opportunities with the cooperative serving the customer along with Central. In conclusion, the supplemental analyses support the original 2023 IRP's conclusions and further demonstrate that the preferred portfolio supplemental is the most cost-effective and least ratepayer risk resource portfolio to meet Santee Cooper's total capacity and energy requirements while maintaining safe, reliable electric service. The preferred portfolio supplemental reflects the same strategies and a very similar resource build as the proposed portfolio in the original 2023 IRP. Importantly, the model selected a natural gas combined cycle resource and substantial solar resources, whether the portfolio's long-term goal was to minimize costs, phase out of coal generation, or provide a path to progressively minimizing CO2 emissions. Moreover, the natural gas combined cycle and solar resource decisions are appropriate, whether the future brings low or high fuel prices, governmental policy that imposes significant charges for emitting CO2, or variations to load projections modeled in the IRP. Therefore, the near-term decisions related to the natural gas combined cycle and solar resources in the preferred portfolio supplemental remain appropriate in a wide range of future conditions. Therefore, Santee Cooper requests the Commission approve its IRP, including the addendum and the short-term action plan and the preferred portfolio supplemental identified by the supplemental analyses. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Dembla. Mr. McCants, please state your name for the record.
It's Matthew McCants.
And by whom are you employed in what capacity?
With Santee Cooper as the Director of Generation Services.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 18 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on July 14, 2023 in this docket?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision one exhibit labeled as Direct Exhibit MJM-1 that was previously filed with the Commission as an attachment to your pre-filed direct testimony in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibit?
No, I do not.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony and exhibit, Mr. McCants, be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Matthew McCants will be entered into the record as if given from the stand. The exhibit MJM1 attached to that pre-filed direct testimony will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 3 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. McCants, Have you also prepared a cause to be prepared under your supervision rebuttal testimony of 15 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on October 27th, 2023 in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belser, at this time, I move that the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. McCants be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. McCants' pre-filed rebuttal testimony of 15 pages will be received into the record as if given from the stand.
Mr. McCants, have you prepared a summary of your direct and rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please deliver it at this time?
Yes. Well, good morning, Chair Bessler and members of the Commission. In my direct testimony, I provide an overview of Santee Cooper's existing generating resources and discuss the performance of those generating resources outlined in the 2023 IRP. I also provide an overview of the fixed O&M and capital cost assumptions of Cross and Winyah in the IRP. Santee Cooper operates a low-cost, reliable generation portfolio that includes a natural gas combined cycle unit, 5 simple cycle combustion turbines, 6 hydro units located on Lakes Marion and Moultrie, 5 landfill gas-to-energy biomass facilities, and 2 coal-fired generating stations. Santee Cooper also owns and operates 3 solar PV sites, totaling approximately 5 megawatts, that contribute to system energy supply, but only provide negligible capacity because of the effective load-carrying capability of solar. Santee Cooper also has a 1/3 ownership interest in a nuclear facility, VC Summer, in partnership with Dominion Energy South Carolina. Santee Cooper's peak load demand is usually during the winter season. Coal-fired generating resources from Winyah and Cross provide the largest percentage of winter capacity, approximately 60%, and annual energy, about 36%, to supply Santee Cooper's customers. Like other coal-fired units in this country, these units have transitioned from base load operation to mostly intermediary operation, requiring more starts, consistent cycles of going from low load at night to higher loads at peak and then back down again every day. Santee Cooper's natural gas units consist of a combined cycle unit and 5 combustion turbines at Rainey Generating Station. The combined cycle unit has recently operated as a base load unit at a high capacity factor due to low natural gas prices. The 2 large frame simple cycle turbines have been operating around a 50% capacity factor to supply energy, and the 3 smaller frame simple cycle units are peaking generation that provide energy during the daily evening peaks of summer and morning peaks of winter when needed, as well as quick start capability for system support. Santee Cooper's oil-fired units, located at Myrtle Beach and Hilton Head, supply capacity all year, but typically only supply energy during high demand days. These units are strategically placed near load centers for optimal system support. Santee Cooper owns or has contracted for sustainable resources, which include, among other things, solar and hydroelectric resources. Santee Cooper's largest owned sustainable resource is hydroelectric generation at Jeffries, which is run as peaking energy supply. Santee Cooper also owns landfill gas generation, located at 5 different facilities in Horry, Georgetown, Berkeley, Lee, and Richland counties. These dispatchable sustainable facilities are capable of being dispatched according to system needs and provide Santee Cooper with capacity and energy. Santee Cooper owns 3 solar PV sites and several smaller demonstration resources, totaling approximately 5 megawatts in nameplate capacity. These non-dispatchable solar assets generally are not capable of being dispatched in response to load demand. The amount of dependable capacity from solar that can be counted on for resource adequacy purposes is only a fraction of the stated nameplate capacity of that resource. Santee Cooper owns a 1/3 share, or 322 megawatts, of VC Summer Unit 1, which is operated as a traditional baseload facility with a high capacity factor. It contributes approximately 11% of Santee Cooper's total energy supply on an annual basis and is a reliable source of steady capacity and energy supply with an average historical forced outage rate over its lifetime of approximately 2.4%. Santee Cooper has maintained a high level of reliability for its fleet of generators. The weighted equivalent forced outage rate for its largest assets, which include Cross, Winyah, and Rainey stations, outperformed the national industry average over the last several years. These resources have been tried and tested with winter weather, and they have proven to be resilient and reliable in meeting the highest peak demands. With respect to development of fixed O&M and capital avoided cost models for Cross and Winyah stations for the use in the IRP, the base case for the fixed costs was Santee Cooper's operating budget for years 2022 through 2024 with certain adjustments. The major adjustments were to assume that all Winyah units and Cross units 1 and 2 would operate at a higher capacity factor of 40% to conservatively account for higher system load growth and increasing energy demand than what was contemplated during the 2022 budget preparation. When adjusting for higher capacity factors, the fixed cost components adjusted were salaries, fixed O&M, and outage cost. Capital expenditures were broken into two categories, those related to environmental regulations and those that are not. Non-environmental related capital costs included capital asset replacements and improvements to station safety, reliability, efficiency, and other general improvements. Environmental related capital costs are associated with the implementation of effluent limitation guidelines, or ELG, compliance equipment, closure of ash impoundments, and solid waste landfill construction. For ELG cost, it was assumed that PhysChem biological treatment technology, as estimated in the middle of 2022, would be installed by the end of 2025. This concludes my summary. And now I will provide a summary of my rebuttal testimony. In my rebuttal testimony, I respond to discrete portions of Google Witnesses, Rapani's and Gabby's recommendation that Santee Cooper update its IRP analysis to include a scenario that allows for the economic retirement of the coal units on a per-unit basis. Specifically, I respond to the notions that the scenario should properly account for the reliability contribution of thermal resources, including the proposed shared facility, and address fuel deliverability concerns. First, I disagree with the Google Witnesses that Winyah Generating Station and other thermal units on Santee Cooper's system appear to be relatively unreliable. To the contrary, Santee Cooper's thermal units have proven to be reliable. The Google Witnesses incorrectly supported their argument by generalizing a specific year's set of forced outage rates for a selected set of low utilization units that do not run often and whose forced outage rates should not characterize the reliability of the whole system. The weight of the system is carried by other coal units at Winyah and Cross and the combined cycle package at Rainey. For 2022, the year cited by the Google Witnesses, Cross had a forced outage rate of 3.6%, Winyah 3.1%, and Rainey combined cycle package of 0.1%. By any standard, these metrics will qualify a system as reliable. I likewise disagree that their statement that Winyah, if operated through 2031, will be operating at an above average age to when most plants would have retired. The Google Witnesses mistakenly cite 47 years as the average age of a retiring coal unit in the U.S. However, this is the age for coal units that are currently planned for retirement. The average age for all coal units that have been retired is 52 years, and the average age of currently operating coal units is 57 years. The Winyah units are currently planned to be retired before reaching 57 years of age, and the Google Witnesses statement is simply incorrect and misleading. With respect to the Google Witnesses' concern that Santee Cooper is overstating the resource adequacy of its system, I point out that, among other incorrect analyses, they again incorrectly rely on analyses of plants that are not routinely relied upon and fail to adequately evaluate and weigh Santee Cooper's actual system resources. They also incorrectly assume that the forced outage rate for low utilization units would be the same if those units were utilized more frequently. The Google Witnesses incorrectly assert that Santee Cooper did not consider the high outage rates of certain thermal units in its analysis, particularly that of Cross. The Google Witnesses again fail to consider the overall historical performance of the unit and instead attempt to cherry-pick the forced outage rate for a specific year. It is simply not prudent planning practice to look at one single year of historical data to project future performance for planning exercises such as an IRP. The 2023 original IRP used a longer-term performance trend on generating assets for future modeling. I further disagree with the Google Witnesses' recommendation that Santee Cooper update the original 2023 RIP to address fuel deliverability concerns. The company has employed a successful operating strategy for the Rainey Station throughout its 20-year history, and the firm transportation capacity provides enough transportation to dispatch all Rainey units across both winter and summer peaks. For new generation resources, Santee Cooper has already addressed the Google Witnesses' fuel deliverability concerns by incorporating cost of diesel oil backup fired facilities for combined cycle resource options utilized in the original 2023 IRP, in addition to firm transportation assumed for the entire combined cycle for all hours of the year. I further disagree with the Google Witnesses' assessment of the impact of Winter Storm Elliott on the Santee Cooper system. By failing to provide detailed information regarding the date and times of the generation resource outages, the Google Witnesses reached the incorrect conclusion that almost 1,000 megawatts of generation was unavailable at the same time and during the load shed event on December 24th of 2022. However, Santee Cooper's generation assets have performed relatively well during the most recent winter events, including Winter Storm Elliott. Contrary to the Google witnesses' assertions, the 272 megawatts of natural gas-fired resources were available at the time of the load shed event on December 24th of 2022. The forced outage of 230 megawatts of capacity at Winyah 4 was the result of a boiler tube leak a day prior to the load shed event and unrelated to winter weather. And the derate of one cross unit occurred due to a mechanical failure unrelated to the cold weather and after the system had already been restored from the load shed event. I conclude my rebuttal testimony by detailing the efforts that Santee Cooper has undertaken to ensure the reliability of its generation resources. In short, Santee Cooper is adequately prepared to prevent and respond to outages by ice storms and winter weather events. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. McCants. Mr. Wagner, please state your name for the record.
Christopher Wagner.
And by whom are you employed in what capacity?
Santee Cooper, Director, Transmission Planning, Research and Development.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 7 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on July 14, 2023 in this docket?
I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Wagner be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Wagner's pre-filed direct testimony will be admitted into the record as if given from the stand.
Mr. Wagner, have you also prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision rebuttal testimony of 10 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on October 27, 2023 in the docket?
I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I would move that the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Wagner be admitted in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Wagner's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Wagner, have you prepared a summary of your direct and rebuttal testimony?
I have.
Would you please deliver that summary at this time?
Yes, sir. Morning, Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. My direct testimony, I provide an overview of Santee Cooper's transmission planning processes, as well as transmission considerations associated with various generating resource planning scenarios. Santee Cooper adheres to NERC reliability standards associated with transmission planning when assessing capabilities of the system under normal and contingency conditions. Routine transmission planning processes include the assessment of impacts associated with forecasted demand, generation additions and retirements, large load additions or losses, and changes on adjacent systems planned to occur within the 10-year planning horizon. Sensitivity cases are also analyzed to understand risks associated with changes to the baseline, to the base plan, and inform strategic decisions related to future transmission facility needs. Santee Cooper is actively engaged in regional and interregional planning processes. Evaluations of near-term generation plans for transmission impacts identified a limited capability to facilitate large off-system purchases without significant transmission improvements. At Santee Cooper Resource Planning's request, Transmission Planning performed a transmission system impact analysis to evaluate transmission impacts that may result from retiring Winyah Station and replacing it with other resources, including potential transmission system reinforcements. Resource Planning also asked Transmission Planning to consider the later retirement of Cross Station for certain scenarios. Nine scenarios were evaluated. 5 involving the retiring of Winyah and replacing it with a combination of natural gas combined cycle units, combustion turbines, solar resources, battery energy storage systems, and or off-system purchases. 2 involving retiring Cross in addition to Winyah and replacing it with off-system purchases. And 2 delaying the Winyah retirement by 5 years and adding solar and off-system purchases to cover the additional capacity needs in the interim. The results indicated that Santee Cooper would not be able to serve demand reliably under any Winyah retirement scenarios without significant transmission improvements. Scenarios which included the construction of baseload resources located in the eastern portion of the Santee Cooper system resulted in the lowest transmission cost estimates and had the highest potential for completion prior to the proposed Winyah retirement, while retiring Winyah and constructing generation in locations geographically distant from load centers or relying exclusively on off-system purchases resulted in significantly higher transmission cost estimates and had the lowest potential for completion prior to the proposed Wynia retirement. The IRP utilized the most likely cost-effective approach, a $443 million base assumption for transmission costs under Wynia retirement scenarios. Studies of the combined Wynia and Cross retirement scenarios indicated that removing all significant baseload generation from the eastern portion of the Santee Cooper system without replacing it in the region significantly impacts the Santee Cooper system as well as neighboring systems. The analysis indicated a cost of $1.94 billion for large-scale, long lead time transmission facility upgrades to ensure continued reliable service and compliance with NERC reliability standards in the combined Wynia and Cross retirement scenarios. This concludes my summary. In my rebuttal testimony, I respond to the recommendation of Google witness Gabby that Santee Cooper conduct a transmission planning analysis to present before its next IRP. I also respond to statements made by several witnesses that capacity at Wynia could be replaced with large-scale battery energy storage systems alone. With respect to Google witness Gabby's recommendation that Santee Cooper conduct a transmission planning analysis before its next IRP, Santee Cooper currently evaluates and considers many of the options associated with each of the recommendations raised by witness Gabby, where they make sense for a specific transmission planning scenario. However, Santee Cooper does not agree that an additional generic transmission planning analysis, as described by witness Gabby, is necessary or appropriate for the purposes of an IRP evaluation. Santee Cooper already engages heavily in regional and interregional transmission planning processes that were developed in compliance with FERC Order 890 and FERC Order 1000 and approved by FERC. The appropriate forum for conceptual transmission assessments like the ones proposed by witness Gabby would be under regional transmission planning processes and not under the IRP proceeding. Regional and interregional transmission planning processes established pursuant to FERC orders are open and transparent processes that include stakeholder involvement. Modeling inputs and key assumptions related to annual studies are presented to stakeholders to allow for stakeholder input prior to studies being initiated, and the transmission plans are developed from the studies, or the transmission plans developed from the studies are presented to stakeholders on an annual basis so that stakeholders have an opportunity to provide feedback and propose alternate solutions. Stakeholders also have an opportunity to request economic power transfer sensitivity studies to simulate the transfer of power across the region or between regions. Transmission planning processes associated with the IRP analysis are intended to be more definitive in nature, where impacts to the transmission system for specific resource scenarios in known locations are evaluated after resource planning analyses have determined they may be a viable solution to meeting system capacity and energy needs. This is typically an iterative process consisting of evaluation and feedback, refinements to the scenarios, and further evaluation, which may be repeated multiple times as costs and risks associated with the different scenarios become better understood. Several witnesses suggested Santee Cooper could replace Wynia with large-scale battery systems at the site. The transmission system was designed around the existence of large generation resources at the Wynia site with the capability to run at maximum output for very long durations to support system reliability during long-duration, high-load, and transmission contingency events. Adding battery storage in very large quantities at a single site like Wynia would require the transmission system to be designed to accommodate both the charging and discharging of the battery systems, which it currently is not. The feasibility and operational risk of adding large quantities of BESS resources at the Wynia site would need to be thoroughly assessed, and significant operational experience would need to be obtained. New technologies like battery storage systems, especially large-scale aggregations in very close proximity, should be responsibly integrated incrementally over a period of time to gain operational experience and comprehensive understanding of the risks and benefits to overall cost and reliability. This is especially important in scenarios where those resources are intended to serve as a significant percentage of the overall capacity required to serve Santee Cooper's load, or where these resources are deployed to provide meaningful support to transmission reliability. Santee Cooper would be taking a substantial risk by rushing to integrate a large-scale deployment of battery storage on a very aggressive timeline with virtually no operational experience to date. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Chair Belzer, at this time, this panel is available for cross-examination and commissioner questions.
Thank you. Sierra Club.
Is this on?
Yes.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, panel. My name is Isabella Ariza, and I represent the Sierra Club in this proceeding. My questions are going to be addressed to Mr. Dembla, but of course, anyone on the panel can feel free to answer. Mr. Dembla, on page 27, lines 5 through 13 of your rebuttal testimony, you discuss EPA Section 111 rules and mention that both carbon capture and sequestration and blending hydrogen with gas are not feasible technologies, correct?
Could you please point me to the page and line numbers again?
Page 27, lines 5 through 13.
Yes, please ask the question again.
I was just confirming that in that section of your testimony, you discuss EPA's Section 111 rules and mentioned that both carbon capture and sequestration and blending hydrogen with gas are not feasible technologies.
That they have not been commercially demonstrated yet, yes.
Okay, but are you aware that if the proposed Section 111 rules become final, that installation of CCS or co-firing with hydrogen would be required in roughly 10 years?
I believe that to be true, yes.
Are you also aware that the Section 111 rules will apply to the shared resource once the rule becomes final?
As it's written now, yes, but I understand it might undergo revisions after the comment period.
Okay. I'd like to move to page 29 of your rebuttal testimony, lines 1 and 2. You state that to continue to operate WINYA beyond the end of 2028, compliance with the effluent limitation guidelines rule was required, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that EPA has issued a proposed revision to the ELG rule that would require enhanced wastewater treatment beyond what you're currently planning to install at WINYA and Cross?
Yes, I believe that proposed rule I think the 2022 rule continues to remain in effect.
But you're aware of the existence of this proposed rule?
I'm aware of the proposal, yes.
Okay. I'd like to refer you to Exhibit DG16 attached to Sierra Club's witness Glick's direct testimony. I'll show it to you. So this is Santee Cooper's response to Sierra Club Discovery Set 1-4A. I'll give you a second to read the highlighted portion of it.
Should the proposal become final? Yes, that is my understanding, that if the 2023 rule is finalized, that it would add costs to the existing plan.
Okay, so I was going to ask. Here it states that complying with the proposed 2023 ELG rule will cost an additional $200 million at both Cross and WINYA. Is that correct?
That's what I see written. That came from a different team.
Okay, and to confirm, particularly at WINYA, that $200 million amount is in addition to the approximately $149 million that you're spending to install the biological treatment by the end of 2025, correct?
I do not know if that's additive directly. I may defer to witness McCants on that.
I have
Yeah, if I could.
Oh,
yeah,
please.
if I could elaborate a little bit on this cost. So as you stated, the proposed rule is yet to be finalized, and so the direction that Santee Cooper's taken with the ELG compliance for WINYA and Cross up to date with the 2022 LG rule, which is in effect in 2025, and as we stated throughout the 2023 IRP, is that that is the least risk right now to our customers with trying to finalize something that needs to be in operation, for example, at WINYA, in order for us to operate that unit or those units up until a time in which we could find it feasible to retire that facility and have new generation and service. The proposed rule that you're stating for ELG compliance, again, it's very hard to come up with a uncertainty about what those costs may be until we see a final rule. As you may be well aware, as these rules get published and drafted and commented, I think there's over 3,000 or so comments right now out there, and Santee Cooper's participating in those. That it's very hard to wrangle really what the cost projections may be for a facility. A lot of these are very technical in nature about what the limitations may be on a very chemical basis, and each facility is different in the way it operates. So the estimates we provided for those rules is the best that we can come up with right now, based off of what we see in the proposals. The technology that's being provided right now by some of the current leaders in innovation in this area is still what we would consider in the industry being leading edge. I think even going back to vendors who we're relying on to operate at this level, really have rough estimates. And when we say rough estimates of what the cost may be, we're probably talking plus or minus 15–20% of what those estimates may be. Your question specifically about whether the $200 million for Cross and Wynja will be on top of the existing 150 that we've proposed, I think would not be correct. As I understand it, there could be potentials to I don't know, optimize the existing equipment that we have planned to procure and install for compliance with the 2022 rule. There would obviously be some additional equipment and systems that we'd have to place in service to comply with a proposal if from what we've seen so far in the proposed rule. It's really hard to say what the difference may be between the two rules, given that we don't know exactly what the new rule is going to be finalized with.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So you are familiar with the $149 million that you're planning to spend now on the biological treatment?
Yes, that's my understanding is the number.
Okay.
Yes.
And just so the record is clear, based on your preferred portfolio, Wynja would retire just 1 year after installing those additional controls that might be $200 million as estimated right now.
I do not believe that to be accurate. I think the preferred portfolio currently assumes a 2031 retirement. So it's 2 years. 2 years is what's assumed, but I think the IRP goes ahead and clarifies and states that that's merely an assumption at this time, and the actual retirement timing will depend on the replacement capacity being in place, and also it's a function of how the load growth materializes over the next several years. So we need to have sufficient capacity resources in place to meet the new reserve margin need, 18%. And which again might be revised with future IRPs and future reserve margin studies, and to meet the growing load in the state.
Okay, and as the rule is proposed right now, is it your understanding that the $200 million to install the additional controls would have to be incurred before the end of 2029?
I cannot comment on the 2023 rule while it's still being formulated. And I think as witness, McCann's clarified that 200 million may not be the correct number. It's very indeterminate at this time.
It is your estimate, though. Is that correct? Your current estimate?
Yes, I've heard that it's my understanding that the equipment that's being installed to comply with 2020 rule, a majority of that equipment would still be useful when we try to comply with the 2023 rule. But that's the extent of my knowledge on that topic.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Reza. Sasiba?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Century Aluminum?
Nothing from Century, Chair.
SACE CCL?
Good afternoon. My name is Emma Clancy, and I represent SACE and CCL. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Mr. Dembla, I'll begin with you. Now, are you familiar with the Governor's Executive Order number 2023-18, which established the Power SC Working Group?
Yes, I have heard of it.
And that order reflects state policy to ensure South Carolina has enough energy and capacity to attract new business. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And you're aware that many companies that have brought their business to South Carolina have clean energy targets, like Google, Nucor, BMW, I believe. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I understand they have their specific targets. Correct.
And so you recognize that investment in clean energy resources like solar or batteries is important to the state's economic development.
Yes, and it's important to most of our customers and Santee Cooper.
Now, your rebuttal responds to ORS's recommendation that Santee Cooper address reliability needs in the 2023 to 2026 period, correct?
Correct.
And that economic development is driving these recent new load or demand. Is that right?
A combination of things, primarily the increase in reserve margin as well.
As well. So
Yes.
it's both.
Yes.
The
It's
economic.
a combination of both. Yeah, we solve for the total capacity needs, which includes the reserve margin and the load projections.
And there's been some recent new demand on the Santee Cooper system,
Correct. Yes.
And you described several near-term PPAs Santee Cooper has arranged to meet that demand. Is that right?
That's right.
Are those PPAs thermal resources?
At least one of them is a system resource, and the system resource are it's a function of what the system resources are. It comes from the Southern Interface from their portfolio.
Okay. And so you all aren't trying to build a new gas plant for resource needs in 2025, correct?
Correct. That's not doable.
That's not possible.
Yes.
Now, on page 24 of your rebuttal testimony, lines 2 through 4, you state, I'll give you a second. You state that to accommodate the added demands from this new load and support higher 18% reserve margins by 2026, an additional 200 megawatts of system capacity will be required. Based on the update provided in your correction earlier, is there still a confirmed capacity need for 2026?
There is a much lower confirmed need in 2026 now, because in addition to the 350 megawatts, 250 megawatts of PPAs and approximately 100 megawatts of Cherokee acquisition, Santee Cooper did, which I addressed in my initial comments, we did negotiate a new contract with a large industrial customer, which migrates half of their demand to a non-firm product, which means we don't need to have capacity for it. So that provides us sufficient resources to meet the 18% reserve margin through winter of 2025, and the shortfall in 2026 is very small now.
Okay. Well, should that shortfall remain small, or should it increase due to the recent climate of economic development? Your testimony on 25 does go on to identify battery storage resources as something that can be deployed in 2 to 3 years to meet a capacity need, correct?
That's correct. Aggressive, but yes.
And part of the reason batteries can be deployed quickly is that they have a reduced permitting and schedule risks. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
And why do they have a reduced permitting risk?
That's just based on input we've received from consultants and the experts in my company, that because of the air permitting and other steps that may not be required for storage, it'll have a quicker permitting time.
And they don't require a gas pipeline.
Correct.
Correct, yeah. Now, you also state that if Santee Cooper would meet a near-term need with battery storage, you would work with Central, correct?
Correct.
And isn't it true that Central already has plans to contract for 150 megawatts of battery storage?
Yes, they had announced that as a part of their non-shared resource, and we are having regular discussions with Central about what the appropriate timing for the system for that resource would be. Santee Cooper has also announced and discussed in our IRP our desire to conduct a pilot project. And we are both discussing at this point how to best implement that and what would be the appropriate timing for that project. And a lot of it depends on what you bring up, what the customer load is and how it materializes over the next few years.
Okay. And to be clear, their project is not a pilot project to the best of your knowledge.
They have not used that term, no.
And are you aware that Dominion has contracted for 3 solar plus battery projects to come online in 2023 and 2024?
I'm not aware.
Okay, well, moving on. According to the IRP, Santee Cooper already has plans to procure solar that would be available in 2026 through an approved CPRE program, correct?
Correct. Again, this is discussed in our IRP, but with a caveat that we have resource planning processes that we follow with Central, and they are aware of that. And now that the CPRE program is approved, we will be engaging with Central and taking the next steps to do this procurement.
Great, you took the words out of my mouth. The commission just recently approved Santee Cooper's CPRE program, correct?
Correct.
And Santee Cooper developed that CPRE program pursuant to Act 90, specifically Section 5831-227. Is that right?
Right.
Now, that section also directs battery storage devices charged exclusively by renewable energy to be procured through an approved CPRE program. Are you familiar with that?
I believe so, yes.
Now, returning to Santee Cooper's procurement plans, a solar-only procurement would serve energy needs, correct?
Correct.
But solar paired with storage can serve capacity needs as well. Is that right?
Yes.
And so couldn't the approved CPRE program tailor requests for proposals to solar and storage projects that provide capacity value?
Yes, it will. I'm just thinking, I think I don't know if that's where you're getting to, but the legislation, the language, when written, I think at the time, the IRA was not in place, and the tax incentives for storage, ITC, investment tax credit, was linked to it being charged with solar. Now that limitation is not there, and we would like to implement storage where it makes the best sense for the system, but subject to discussions with Central and as we design this procurement, we would get market information on the ability for storage. It's very likely, but we've not made those decisions yet.
Okay, that's fine. But are you saying you're also interested in implementing storage by itself to take the most advantage of these IRA tax credits?
Yeah, I think I'm saying it's where it makes the most sense. It may make the most sense as a standalone with solar, hybrid. We don't know that today.
Okay. Well, just in terms of the approved CPRE program and what you can do under it, you could issue requests for proposals for solar plus storage under that CPRE program, correct?
Subject to verification, I believe so, yes.
Okay. And could you also, do you have the flexibility in that program to also basically favor projects in locations that might take the most advantage of those IRA tax credits, like energy community bonus credit?
I think the more important factor would be the all-in price. So I think these tax incentives should incentivize developers who are bidding into the process to try to capture as many tax credits as possible and pass on the benefits of those tax credits to Santee Cooper's and Central's customers.
Okay.
So it depends. I think we look at the all-in price that our customers will end up paying. And clearly the renewable energy credits that come with it.
Right. And just to be clear, you can, if you determine that those renewable credits will save money, you can specify that in a CPRE request for proposal, can't you?
I think we'll have to design the program carefully to get the most interest. And if we believe that putting limitations on the location of solar projects limits the response, that'll feed into our decision. So I think what I'm saying is that if we give the solar developers enough bandwidth, the competitive forces should lead them towards areas which have the community benefit. But if they can develop a project more cheaply elsewhere and pass on that benefit to our customers without capturing that benefit, I think we would still capture it.
Great. So you can design it for the best outcome for customers.
Yeah, it's a question of how much limitations we put on the solar developers. Because the more limitations you put, the less of a response you may get. So I think we will look at just what makes sense and get to capture the best pricing we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dembla. Mr. Wagner, I'm going to move on to you.
Sure.
Give me 1 second. Now, so Mr. Wagner, you submit testimony on Santee Cooper's transmission planning and cost assumptions, correct?
Correct.
So you mentioned Santee Cooper conducted a transmission impact analysis, or TIA, to develop the IRP's transmission cost assumptions.
We did.
And so as it works, generally the resource planning team would initiate a request for the TIA to evaluate generation scenarios, but the transmission planning team conducts the actual transmission cost evaluation. Is that right?
Correct.
And are you a member of the resource planning team or the transmission planning team?
The transmission planning team, but we report to Raul as one group.
Okay. So for this IRP, the resource planning team requested evaluation of 9 different scenarios that replaced either WINYA or WINYA and cross with different combinations of resources, correct?
Correct.
Gentlemen, I know that you want to look at who's asking the question, but I need for you to direct your speech to the microphone.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Now, according to page 6, lines 19 through 22 of your direct testimony, the TIA found that scenarios with replacement resources in the eastern portion of the system had the lowest transmission costs and shortest implementation times. Is that right?
Could you repeat those
Yes.
line numbers?
Lines 19 through 22.
Yes.
Yes. And so the eastern portion of the system is where WINYA is located. Is that correct?
Correct.
That location is also close to Santee Cooper's direct serve territory,
is.
right? And there is existing transmission infrastructure at WINYA. Is that right?
There is.
Now, the specific cost and scenario data in this TIA is confidential, correct?
Correct.
But the resulting cost assumptions used in the IRP for each retirement scenario, that's public and that's in your testimony.
Correct.
So your testimony states that the TIA supported a $443 million assumption for transmission costs under WINYA retirement scenarios, correct?
Correct.
So each portfolio retiring WINYA assumed that transmission cost. Is that right?
That's my understanding. The resource planning folks decided on what costs were used under what scenarios.
Okay, thank you. Now, have you reviewed witness Painter's supplemental testimony?
I have, but it's been a while. So.
The supplemental testimony filed last week?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. There's a lot of testimony in
Yes,
this docket.
it is.
Now, he states on page 2, lines 8 through 11, that Santee Cooper assumes that the investment in off-site transmission upgrades to support generation at Kennedy's would be $443 million. Do you recall that?
I do.
So you referred to the $443 million figure as the cost to retire WINYA, but it's actually the cost to replace WINYA with generation at Kennedy's.
It's a combination of all.
Okay.
So it when you look at it from a transmission planning perspective, you look at the system and you take into account, again, kind of like the IRP, it's a snapshot. You look at the system, how it's configured, where all the resources are available on the system, and then understand what the transmission limitations are in that scenario. So it's not a just WINYA retirement thing or just a resource addition thing. It's a system snapshot. Right. It's a system look.
It's a snapshot of replacing WINYA with Kennedy's. It's
a snapshot of replacing WINYA with Kennedy's and any other changes that occur on the system with respect to that scenario. So there were solar additions in that scenario as well.
Okay.
There were other things.
Okay. Now, Kennedy's is not within the eastern portion of the system, correct?
It is very close. So we kind of define the eastern portion of the system as east of I-95. So it is right on the border.
Okay. It's more in central South Carolina, though.
No, it's east of I-95.
East of I-95. Okay. It's not as east as WINYA, though, right?
It's not as east as WINYA, correct.
And I know you mentioned this TIA was confidential, but without revealing any confidential information, did it evaluate any WINYA retirement scenario that cost less than $443 million?
There was a scenario that included a one-by-one combined cycle at Hampton with a very large battery at the WINYA site that was less than the $443 million.
And can you reveal if those cost savings were significant? I know you can't give numbers, but.
I mean, I don't know what your definition of significant is. They were 150 million less, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay. And can you reveal why do you think those scenarios were lower cost?
Because it utilized the WINYA site.
Okay.
But now there's caveats in our assessment, right? That we did not look at charge and discharge of those batteries. We didn't have the enough information to do that at the time. We did not look at was a 4-hour battery capable of providing the same amount of support at WINYA that a 24-hour baseload unit would be capable of. Those are two different animals when it comes to from a generation perspective. We're talking about replacing a baseload 100% available unit at a generating facility with a 4-hour battery. That's a tremendous difference. Also, a 650 megawatt battery is huge from a transmission perspective, or from a Santee Cooper perspective. There aren't many of those that exist in the country today, right? And it's a large percentage of our total load from a balancing perspective. So a lot more needs to go into that if it is a viable scenario from a resource planning perspective.
Okay. Now, if initial analyses show that siting resources at WINYA reduces transmission costs, shouldn't Santee Cooper further evaluate that option?
Chair Belser, this is asked answered. I think he's given a comprehensive answer on exactly the evaluation that was performed, what the limitations were of that evaluation, how more evaluation needs to be done, and how there's not a direct cost comparison. So I think he's already answered this question.
I'm asking about if they should evaluate this scenario.
Yeah, I'm going to allow it. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Overruled.
Could you repeat your question?
Yes, of course. If your initial analysis shows siting resources at WINYA reduces transmission costs, shouldn't Santee Cooper at least further evaluate that option?
To the extent that it is a cost-effective scenario from a resource planning perspective, then yes. But we were not asked to further evaluate it. So my assumption is that it was not cost-effective from an overall portfolio perspective.
Okay, well, you only conducted one TIA for this IRP, correct?
For this IRP.
Okay. And would renewable resources siting at WINYA also be eligible for the IRA Energy Community Bonus Credit?
I'm not sure if WINYA specifically falls into that category because it's not retired today, right? So I don't know
once
if
it's retired.
Once it's retired, if it is identified officially as an energy community, then yes.
Okay. Now, you touched on this a bit, but in rebuttal, you expressed concerns about rushing to build a large battery build-out to replace WINYA capacity in the late 2020s.
Correct.
Now, those concerns aren't based on the TIA, are they?
They are partly based on some of the conversations and that we had around the TIA study. Right. So,
okay, but not that you don't have that's not based on like a formal analysis.
Right. That's correct.
And since, as your colleague asserts, battery storage can be deployed in 2 to 3 years, wouldn't you agree that Santee Cooper has some time to gain experience prior to 2028 or 2030 on battery storage?
Sometime on an incremental basis, but these things take time to understand, to build tools, to develop processes around. It's not. It's not something that I think when you're relying on these types of resources to fulfill the critical need that we're talking about here from a reliability perspective. to provide capacity, not just at peaking times, but throughout the times when you may need that capacity at that location, and to provide transmission support under contingency, which the WINYA units currently do. When you're trying to assess that, it takes time to really understand it, to really gain operational experience with these types of facilities. And so yeah, the 2 to 3 year time, that's the first installation of batteries that we would have on our system. Then we're talking about, you know, incrementally building that up over time. I don't know that you get to 650 or 700 or 800 megawatts, you know, in that time, and feel comfortable with that at that point. Not a 4-hour, you know, duration, sites.
And are you aware that there are currently, I believe, more than 13,000 megawatts of battery storage deployed in the U.S.?
I don't know that figure, but that seems reasonable given the size of the country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. McCants.
Yes.
I'm going to leave you out. Now, give me 1 second. Now, your testimony describes Santee Cooper's existing generation fleet, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And according to Table 4 of your direct testimony, the utility's current capacity mix is 23% gas and 60% coal. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Your testimony also covers unit performance like forced outage rates, capacity factors, and how various units performed during Winter Storm Elliott, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Now, other utilities like Duke and Dominion normally provide this information in annual fuel proceedings. Did you know that?
No, I'm not familiar with their normal processes.
Right, so Santee Cooper doesn't have annual fuel proceedings before this commission, correct?
That's my understanding. That's correct.
And so this is the commission's first chance to look at how Winter Storm Elliott impacted the Santee Cooper system, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Now, are you familiar with FERC's October 2023 report on Winter Storm Elliott's impacts to utility operations?
Yes, I've given it a quick read and familiar with the report as it's come out.
Okay. So you're aware that of the outages taking place during Winter Storm Elliott, 63% of unavailable megawatts occurred at gas plants and 23% at coal plants. Is that right?
Subject to check, that sounds about right.
Okay, now Santee Cooper had outages at its gas and coal units during Winter Storm Elliott, right?
Yes, we did. It depends on the amount of time that you want to refer to for Winter Storm Elliott. People have used various different times, but yeah, generally around, for Santee Cooper, the biggest event was the night of the 23rd and morning of the 24th. For others in the region, it may have been a little sooner. For others, it may have been a little later. But generally during the 5 or 6 day event, yes, we experienced some outages during those times.
Okay, and in a discovery response to CCL and SACE, those outages are attributed to mechanical failures and freezing issues, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Chair Belzer, at this time, I'd like to introduce CCL, a cross exhibit titled CCL McCants Cross Exhibit 1. And this is that discovery response. I have copies for council, the court reporter, and the commission.
Let council see it before.
Great, thanks. And as you'll see, the one page is the complete document, and on the back, I've zoomed in on the, I've hidden some rows so that it's more legible.
Okay. You can go ahead. Ms. Clancy, this is in response to discovery?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, and can I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. McCants, can you confirm that Santee Cooper prepared this document and provided it in response to CCL data request 220 or in discovery?
Yes, I attested and responded with this request to discovery.
Okay, thank you. Chair Belzer, at this time, I'd like to ask that CCL states McCants Cross Exhibit 1 be marked and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Any objection? Hearing none. CCL says McCants Cross Exhibit number 1 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 4 and received into the evidence of this case.
Now, Mr. McCants, do you agree with the FERC report that Santee Cooper shed 86 megawatts of load early on December 24th?
Subject to check. I don't know the exact amount and what time you're speaking of. There was a lot going on the morning of the 24th. So if you don't have any more specifics to me than that, I'll generally agree with you.
Between around 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. But it was, the early morning, the 24th.
Yeah, again,
Okay.
not quite sure the numbers and the time you're talking about, but
Okay, well, do you recall that Santee Cooper experienced over 500 megawatts of unplanned outages and derates from about 2 to 7 a.m. the morning of the 24th?
yeah, I do agree with those numbers.
And the night of December 23rd, was there also a 300 megawatt outage due to a boiler tube leak?
Yes, that was on Winyon Unit 4.
Winya Unit 4. And so that leak, that outage increased unplanned outages that winter, night, and morning to 800 megawatts, correct?
Yeah, I believe you're referring to some figures that were in that report. I think your underlying document that you're referring to of 800 megawatts. So I think there were several things during that morning that culminate to 800 megawatts. There were, as you identified here in the exhibit that I provided, there were some issues that were going on between that 2:30 and I think 7 p.m. time that was presented in the Winter Storm Elliott report due to both freezing issues as well as mechanical and electrical issues. Those, if you were only referring to this, it wouldn't represent the entire 800 megawatts because some of those megawatts that were in the report for Winter Storm Elliott also included commercial generators, PPA agreements that Santee Cooper has contracted for during those times. So if you were trying to add all this up within just this reference document, this is only Santee Cooper owned assets, then you would not reach that 800 megawatts. But yes, between that and the resource that was down for a tube leak unrelated to Winter Storm Elliott the night before, you get around roughly 800 megawatts.
Okay, thank you. Now, changing gears slightly, on page 10 of your direct testimony, you describe the capacity factors of various units at Winya and Cross coal plants. Is that right?
Yes, it appears so.
And so Cross units 1 and 2 and Winya units 3 and 4 have some of the lowest capacity factors, correct?
Yes, for the coal-fired generating stations, yes, they have some of the lower capacity factors.
Okay, and would you describe those as low utilization units on Santee Cooper's system, in addition to the oil-fired units mentioned on the following page?
I wouldn't characterize, again, the units you mentioned were, which ones again?
Cross units 1 and 2, Winya units 3 and 4.
I would particularly classify Winya 4 during a period of time, and then also Cross 2 probably being more of a low utilization factor units out of those that you've mentioned.
Okay. And you do note at page 10, lines 1 through 2, that Cross Unit 1 has provided a declining supply of energy over the last 5 years, as evidenced in the declining capacity factor. This unit is one of the most reliable coal units in the fleet with the lowest average FOR. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I was attempting in this testimony to provide some clarity and some language around taking numbers that were provided in the IRP and capacity factors and forced outage rates and giving a little bit of a story about each of the units as I could. So your statement is correct.
Now, Low utilization units. Those units don't run often, but if I understand your testimony, they're called on when they're needed most. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, low utilization unit is not probably something a definition you're gonna look up in and find something on the EIA website. That's a characterization of a unit, I would say, that's probably, less than a 20% capacity factor, one that we don't rely on necessarily year-round for energy needs, but it's always there for capacity. And in the case of a high-demand day, not only are you getting the capacity for that resource, but you're also getting, most of the time, a good amount of energy from that resource as well in order to meet the demand for the day.
Right. So you basically you save them. They serve their purpose for these like reliability events, like Winter Storm Elliott. Correct?
I wouldn't say that that's the only time they're needed. There's a lot of things that go on during the year for different reasons across the system and for voltage support, more than just necessarily energy demand, but that's one of the reasons why they would be utilized during the year is for a peak energy demand system kind of day.
Excuse me. Yeah. Thank you. Now, on page 4, lines 19 through 21 of your rebuttal, you state that low utilization units experience most of their forced outage events during periods of startup, after, and during long periods of idle time. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I did say that.
Now, looking at this cross exhibit, didn't two of at least the lower utilization coal units, Cross 1 and Wynyah 4, have issues during the Winter Storm Elliott period?
Well, I could isolate each one of these scenarios. Cross Unit 1 did experience some freeze-related issues on the morning of December 24th during Winter Storm Elliott. I would say that somewhat unfortunately, it's characterized as a freezing issue because obviously there were some things that did freeze. I would say that this was, and I don't know how to say it, maybe an honest mistake. There had been a good bit of work on Cross Unit 1 for heat tracing systems over the past couple of years to modernize those systems. During installation of some of those systems, a thermocouple, basically a thermostat. If you think about your home, there's a thermostat that basically you set for a certain temperature, and when your home gets to that certain temperature, it kicks on the heat. Well, heat tracing is similar for piping. There's a thermostat that is measuring the ambient temperature or the pipe temperature, and when it reaches that temperature, then the system kicks on and tries to heat the line. And in this instance, we found that during this event that there had been a thermostat for the heat tracing system that had been located, and it was in good shape and good place, and it was operating the way it was supposed to. But unfortunately, during the pre-winter checklist, folks at the station with good intentions had placed some other wind barriers around the facility and had actually encapsulated the area in which this thermostat was located. So unfortunately, during the cold winter night that happened on the 24th or the 23rd going to 24th, instead of the thermostat seeing the ambient temperature being as cold as it was sitting in an enclosure with heat, and it failed to come online the way it should and keep the pipe warm. So when that happened, the crews were able to keep the unit online. They experienced some issues. They were able to have a small derate, but kept the unit online. Quickly found out what the issue was. They were able to manually control the heat tracing on this line. They were able to thaw it back out very quickly and keep that unit basically online during this peak time. So that was what happened and transpired on Cross Unit 1. The event that transpired on Wynyah Unit 4 was due to I think it was a economizer tube leak. And that's unrelated to winter weather. Unfortunately, one of the things that we have to face with operating a thermal generator coal unit is tube leaks within the boiler. They happen in all kinds of different sections at times. And this one happened, unfortunately, the night before or the day before Winter Storm Elliott's coldest part that hit our service territory. The unit had to come offline in order to mitigate other damage to the unit and a longer repair time. So usually when something like this happens and we know that there's a big demand on the system, our crews work endlessly and tirelessly to do what they can in order to repair that unit and get it back online as soon as they can. So that's particularly what happened to those two units during that time. And I don't remember if you had another question associated with that. If so, please.
No, I just
repeat.
was confirming that, yes, Cross 1 had, according to this exhibit, freezing and mechanical issues, And Winya 4 had freezing and mechanical issues as well, it looks like, according to this exhibit.
Well, when Unit 4 was a boiler tube leak that was unrelated to freezing weather, so you could categorize that as a mechanical issue. Yes.
Mechanical issue, thank you. Okay, now, you just also said, though, that those low utilization units, one of the purposes they serve is to serve the system during these high load reliability events. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for bearing with me. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Central Electric Power Cooperative.
Excuse me, no questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Santee Cooper Industrial Customer Group.
Thank you. Staff, if I may, I'm going to use the Elmo for a moment. Can I get a little help, please? Mr. Denbla.
Yes.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice to meet you. Let me start with you, if I may. I don't have many questions. Mr. Dembla, help me understand a little bit about Santee Cooper. I don't have an occasion to deal with Santee Cooper very much, and so any help you could give me would be appreciated. I would appreciate it. And first, let me draw your attention to what's on the screen and before you. It is Section 58-31-30 of the South Carolina Code of Laws, which deals with Santee Cooper. And I would like to read this section that's on the screen for the record, if I may, and then I'll just ask you if I read it correctly. A, the Public Service Authority has power to develop the Cooper River, the Santee River, the Congaree River in the state as instrumentalities of intrastate, interstate, and foreign commerce and navigation to produce, distribute, and sell electric power, to acquire, treat, distribute, and sell water at wholesale, to reclaim and drain swampy and flooded lands, and to reforest the watersheds in the rivers in the state, and also has all powers which may be necessary or convenient for the exercise of these powers, including, without limitation, the generality of the following powers. Have I read that correctly?
Yes.
All right. And I'll tell you that the statute lists a whole bunch of powers beyond this section. But I think what I would like to ask you is, would you agree with me that the powers of Santee Cooper involve the economic development of these river basins? Would that be a fair summary of what the powers of Santee Cooper are?
Repeat that question, please.
Would you agree with me that if you condense this to a summary, this language I read to you, that Santee Cooper's powers are to encourage the economic development of these river basins? Would that be a fair statement?
I am not sure. I think it's saying that it has the power to do so and then use it to produce, distribute, and sell electric power. So, yes.
Would you agree with me that electric power is necessary for economic development?
Sure, yes.
All right, thank you. I'm going to show you Code Section 58-31-710. It's
I would just add to my response that low-cost, reliable power is important for the economic development of South Carolina.
Well, you may, and may I suggest that by statute you're required to develop that. May I read this and just let's do the same drill as the code section before?
Yes, please.
The Public Service Authority, through its Board of Directors, shall adopt and publish pricing principles that respect and balance factors including, but not limited to, the adherence to the authority's mission to be a low-cost provider, reliability, transparency, preservation of the authority's financial integrity, equity among customer classes, gradualism in adjustments to its pricing and rate schedule type, encouragement of efficiency and demand response, adequate notice to customers, and relief mechanisms for financially distressed customers. The authority shall also maintain and continue to offer rate schedules and options that provide demand-side management flexibility, including but not limited to non-firm sales and interruptible power rates and conservation opportunities to its customers. Have I read that correctly?
Yes, sir.
All right. Does your preferred portfolio address the statutory requirement that
Madam Chair,
you be a low-cost and reliable service provider?
Just a moment.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Mr. Cooper.
I object. First of all, Mr. Dembla is not an attorney. This is asking for legal conclusions. Secondly, the statute speaks for itself. Third, there's a statute that's specifically on point for the IRP. So I object on all those grounds.
Mr. Elliott?
Not calling for a legal conclusion whatsoever. The witness volunteered a moment ago that part of the Santee Cooper mission was low-cost and reliable service. It's my client's position that the preferred portfolio provides for low-cost and reliable service. I don't know why council would object to that conclusion. I'm simply asking if his preferred portfolio satisfies the requirements of the statute. If he doesn't know, that's fine. I don't think that's the answer I'd encourage, but that's fine.
It's also misleading because there is a specific
specific
Act 90.
IRP
Yes.
statute. This is the general powers, is it not?
Yes,
Or
sir.
the
Yes, ma'am, and they're still very much in force.
Okay.
This shouldn't be complicated.
I'm going to overrule the objection. If he knows, he can answer. If he doesn't know, he can say, I don't know.
I would say that the IRP's and the IRP's preferred portfolio complies with the low cost, reliable, and other metrics such as emissions, which are specified in the relevant Act 90 for the IRP.
Very fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now let me follow up a little bit. As I understand your testimony, Santee Cooper proposes to close the Wynya facility in 2031 or when an alternative generation source is available. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, and one more addition to it is the load growth. So I would say the Wynya unit retirement relies on Santee Cooper having sufficient resources in place to serve its customers reliably, including the load at the time.
Excellent. Now, as I understand your IRP and your testimony, one alternative to Wynya will be a natural gas generation plant.
That in our preferred portfolio, besides other resources, it includes a natural gas combined cycle. Yes.
Yes, sir. And as I understand it from your testimony, you anticipate needing somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 megawatts to 1,400 megawatts. Is that fair to say?
Could you point me to the page?
Let's try page 28.
Of the rebuttal or the direct?
Direct, I'm sorry.
Sorry, sir, did you say page 28?
Yes, let me draw your attention, if I may, to page 28, lines 7 through 11.
Yes.
All right, and so as I understand it, your preferred portfolio anticipates an additional 1,000 to 1,400 megawatts of natural gas generation in order for you to feel comfortable closing Wynya.
That's correct. I'm hesitating because these numbers are, In the supplemental testimony, there are refreshed amounts and the slightly adjusted preferred portfolio. But the essence of what you're saying is correct, that it would need a large combined cycle, 1,000 megawatts plus.
Excellent. That's simply my point. Thank you. Now, I think you've got an option to self-build a plant. Is that the case? You can. That is to say, for Santee Cooper to build it on its own and operate it.
I would say that's to be discussed and decided. It'll, I would say, likely be on our balance sheet, but that does not mean we will build it, outsource it. How we do it is yet to be decided.
Understood. But that's as opposed to the option of maybe co-owning a generating plant with Dominion, correct? You have the option to own it yourself, or you're considering the option to go in jointly with Dominion and build a plant, aren't you?
Subject to, yes, we are considering both alternatives, but I would note that building a plant with Dominion would require legislative action. Santee Cooper currently cannot do that, but we are investigating that opportunity, and if there are merits to it, we will pursue that option.
All right, and my next line of question is, where are you in your analysis for planning for additional gas-fired generation? Have you begun to plan design a plant?
Not design. We are still in early investigations and due diligence. Both, as you're aware, both Dominion's and Santee Cooper's IRPs, with their own different set of assumptions, supported the need for a combined cycle to serve our respective loads, and recognizing that this requires natural gas combined cycle infrastructure upgrades. I think it made sense to have that discussion together so we can optimize it at the state level. And where we are is that based on that finding, we did execute a memorandum of understanding. And since then, we have both prosecuted our IRPs or are in the process of, and the concrete step we have taken is an RFP issued to the NACH, because that is the most important step, is to confirm the feasibility and the cost of bringing natural gas to the state. And we have issued that RFP. There's a team that's analyzing the responses right now. And the only information I have on that is that it's feasible, but a lot more work needs to happen before we make decisions.
All right, sir. And it's my understanding that it might take 5 to 7 years at least to soup to nuts to design and construct a gas plant, get the gas to the plant, that sort of thing. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I would say probably closer to the longer period you mentioned, but yes. But there are many pieces to this, including the timeline for transmission, the timeline for the natural gas infrastructure, which Santee Cooper will not build. And so it's as these investigations and due diligence continues, we'll put together a more detailed schedule, but that'll take us some time.
But would it be fair to say that 2031 timeframe may be a reasonable estimate of the amount of time to get that alternative generation in place?
I would say it's reasonable, but still aggressive.
Okay. But to be clear, this IRP envisions that WINUA will stay in operation until that alternative is in place, correct?
Correct. The analytics show that they have to happen at the same time. Otherwise, we'd be short.
Now, I want to ask you just a little bit, if I may, about your reserve margin. I will tell you that in your testimony just this morning, you satisfied me and my client about the adequacy of your reserve margin, but I do want to ask you a couple of additional questions. Let me ask, and Mr. McCants, you're welcome to jump in if you want. Your gas-fired generation you now have 2 units. One, let's start with Rainy. I'm curious, where do you get your gas at Rainy? Transco?
Yes.
Okay, fine. And I'm curious, do y'all buy it and have it transported in house, or do you rely on an outside consultant or marketer to secure your gas, or do you have hands-on experience?
I'll take an attempt at it. Witness McCants, please feel free to chime in. We do have a existing contract for majority of gas needed for that plant, but we do have a fuels team that manages that contract and signs up for incremental needs as needed from time to time.
All right, sir. Fair.
Nothing to add, Mr. Dim.
That's good. And as I understand it, having just recently closed on Cherokee, I think you get your gas for Cherokee directly from Transco, don't you?
I believe so, yes.
All right. In your experience, do you find a gas to be at least liquid, if not a little expensive at Zone 5 on Transco? You have all the gas on Transco that you need?
Again, I don't run the fuels team, but that seems correct.
All right. And do you understand that that Southern and CGT may be more constrained than Transco in terms of gas delivery? Do you understand that to be the case?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And I think that the Winya plant, if you built the plant with Dominion at Kennedy's, you would be relying on CGT to provide the gas service to that, correct?
It would be some combination of that and other upstream providers, I believe. But again, that configuration is yet to be finalized.
I understand. And then just a couple other questions. On page 25 of your rebuttal, Mr. Dembla, you, at lines 3 through 7, you testify that Rainy actually could be upgraded to add additional capacity. And again, either you or Mr. McCants, I'm just asking, just inquiring.
Yeah, so the question is that...
Yeah, the question is, can it be upgraded? And your testimony is you could add 90 megawatts to the system. And I'm curious to ask you if there are any plans to do that.
There are plans to investigate that. I believe the assumptions for that are being developed right now, so we can incorporate this in our analysis.
But you would anticipate that Transco would have sufficient gas capacity for you if you decided to upgrade it. Is that true?
That's the input, but again, yet to be finalized and determined and analyzed.
I understand. All right, and did you testify that an option might be going forward, additional purchased power contracts to stay ahead of the curve, to keep your margin up, and to provide low cost and reliable service to your customers?
Yes, so that depends. So in my direct testimony, I addressed it by saying that we are working on signing these contracts. I believe in my rebuttal, I confirmed what the progress we have made. So for now, we have sufficient capacity for the next 2 winters, but we have a team that's constantly looking at other opportunities. The RFP process that was completed, those bids have now expired, and we've logged in what we wanted to, or we are in the process of locking in the PPAs we wanted to, but we will, given what's going on in the state, there's a lot of focus within Santee Cooper on constantly looking at opportunities to get more capacity.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but because y'all are doing a fantastic job of economic development, were you to land a plant of some considerable size, it would put pressure on that reserve margin you have. Isn't that true?
Yes, it would.
And in your experience, how quickly, if it takes 7 to 9 years to build a gas plant, right? How quickly could you react if you found yourself fortunate enough to have some additional economic development within your service territory?
I'd object. This calls for speculation. If the council could give some parameters other than, general economic development efforts that are significant, and this could cause additional time, I don't think the witness has any context to answer the question. So if he could rephrase this question and get out of these hypotheticals with no parameters, that would be helpful.
Can you get some more detail, Mr. Elliott? Like increase what? Can you give an amount of load or something that would help the witness?
Well, I'm really relying on. He had some excellent testimony in his rebuttal testimony about how they landed a couple of economic development projects which drove downward pressure on their reserve margin to below 15. My question simply is, they're in a great place now, Madam Chair, but if there's a great push in this state for additional economic development, and Santee Cooper does as good a job as anybody, and so I was trying to get some idea about how quickly you get an RFP out for additional capacity if they need another 100 or 150 megawatts. I think that's what he had in his rebuttal testimony.
Well, then that's the question. How long?
It depends on Santee Cooper has options that we would pursue if there was economic development load that materialized. Now, depending on the timing of that load, we will have a sense of how much time we have to react to that. So if it's a 4 to 5 year timeline, that would be different. But if a load is materializing in a year from now, which is unlikely because it takes time after signing the deal to place your operations, then PPA may be the only option. If we have 3 years, 2 to 3 years, we might pursue a battery storage option or the rainy 90 megawatt option we discussed. So we have a menu of options. There's a group within Santee Cooper right now, given the urgency for capacity and the economic development, that's really focused on looking at what's out there in the market. So between a combination of those things, we are ready to react. But we do feel the pressure of economic development and the capacity needs within the state. But we are on it.
Very fine. And I believe you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Google, do you have questions? Can we do them after lunch?
No question.
Okay. ORS, do you have questions?
No questions, Madam Chair.
All right. Let's break for lunch. We'll come back for commissioner questions and any redirect at that time. Let's break until 2:20. Thank you.